in my opinion, so obviously, KG is my number one power forward of all time. And I think he could do everything Tim did, but with more athleticism and in a completely worse situation almost his entire career. Um, but you put Tim Duncan over Kevin Garnett. Why?
Well, I think that being an offensive threat matters. I'm not saying KG wasn't, but like I said, the averages are damn near the same as far as Tim Duncan averaged 19, Kevin Garnett averaged 17, 17.8, 18, 19. But as a overall, I'm looking at it right now. Tim Duncan definitely had more 20-point seasons than uh, Garnett, and that matters to me. And like not fully, but it does. And I think in order to be consider that, you have to be able to be of a real offensive threat. And winning matters. I mean, before, and we could say the system that he played in with Pop and all that. Pop didn't win until he got Duncan. So we could also say that the system also moves around Duncan itself. Duncan's played with won 2 championships with David Robinson. Then he went to won another 3, with a different cast. But one thing stayed the same was him. And I think that is important to mention that Duncan was probably the reason for the system. Because look at right when, granted, the Kawhi last year with them, if Zaza doesn't come up under him and they win the title, then we're talking differently. Then I think I placed Tim somewhere different in that list. But as of now, it's proven that Pop isn't really much without Duncan. That's kind of blatantly obvious that he's not much without Duncan. So as far as system goes, I know we've talked about that. And like, if you put KG in that system, does he have 5 championships? I know you say, yeah. Me, I don't know. I would have to say no, because then we could go back. Well, what if we put Dirk in that situation? What if we call Malone in that situation?
Well, okay, let me spin it though. What if we put Tim Duncan in Kevin Garnett's situation? Is Tim Duncan doing what KG did on those Timberwolf days? And then let's look at the types of players that Kevin Garnett had around him. He had, for a long time, the best player he had on his team was either Tom Gugliotta or Wally Zerbiak. The time they did, he took them to the Western Conference Finals. He had Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell. And I remember seeing him in Houston's in downtown Phoenix. He was flirting with the waitress or the hostess, and I walked up. That's KG. I turned. Trent Hassel's standing right there. I'm like, this is Trent Hassel. Like, the Timberwolves are in town. If Trent Hassel's your like 4th best player on your team, no knock on Trenton, but KG didn't have a squad almost his entire career. He, like I said, he led his team in almost every major category. I believe, I don't have the stats in front of me, but he was one of the only players to ever do that. And to me, yeah, the argument of if you put KG on that Spurs squad, do they win 5? You put Dirk on there, you could interchange people into a better situation. I think they may still be that good. But if you put Duncan on those Timberwolves teams, I don't think he doesn't have Tony Parker and Ginobili in a system that's proven to work with a coach who knows how to make adjustments. I think Duncan still puts up his 20 and 10, but Garnett could do so much more with less, in my opinion, with his athleticism, with his the dog in him, and the way he played defense. I'm not saying Duncan's a product of his environment entirely, but I think KG had so much more to his game than and so much less to work with. You disagree?
I do. um, the reason I disagree is because the bums on KG's team just goes to bad management. That's not. I don't think that has any. Hold on. Tony Parker was the 28th pick in a really shitty draft in 2001, and Manu Ginobili was, I think, an even shittier pick, 57th pick. So obviously these teams thought obviously you can never tell who's going to be who. But I think that this is probably a different conversation, but I think management plays a role in who you surround your top players with.
Mm-hmm.
And that could go towards the leadership of Duncan and the leadership of Pop of how they built them. Because we could also say Tony Parker was a prodigy. Like if you watched his documentary, he was all this and that in France. He went to a strictly basketball school in high school, which all they focused on was basketball, and you went to class, but you were in the gym for like 6-7 hours out the day.
Mm-hmm.
Ginobili, I wouldn't know, but I'm assuming the same thing as being a European player. And we know that Europeans take basketball or any of their sports totally different than we do here, as far as like you're a pro at 13, 14, 15. So I think that no one knew what they were going to be. And I think that goes to the leadership. And if we're going to talk about great leadership, as even though Duncan was never fully intense like Garnett was, and I think a lot of us would take leadership to be you got to pound your chest, you got to yell, scream, and all this and that. Tim Duncan was always eased back and laid back and easy.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know him behind those closed doors. We don't know how he infected them that way. I mean, for what we know, there's just 5 chips, and they got the job done. So I would say that probably plays a huge role in how that organization is turned. Because, like I said, he's not there no more, and they're just a complete shit show.
But okay, so and I obviously I'm not trying to knock Tim Duncan in this argument. I think he's
no, yeah, but I think it's
yeah,
just for
but also from a
out here.
right, yeah, from a management standpoint, let's not forget about what happened with Joe Smith. When they tried to finesse and the contract of Joe Smith, former first overall pick, and then they ended up losing draft picks, and they got in trouble with the league, and that really screwed up them trying to build a dynasty in Minnesota. And so, like, if they don't get caught doing that, which a lot of people don't even really even know about, and again, the best team that Garnett had was with an aged Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell as his 2-3. I would take Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili over Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell with Greg Popovich as your coach instead of Flip Saunders.
Yeah, okay. I would
100%.
But no, yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, what you're saying about the management, Garnett was in a terribly ran franchise in Minnesota, and he made them even relevant at all. And I think Duncan would have still been like we've seen Chris Bosh and Kevin. I still think he would have put up his numbers and been a great player. But Duncan, you could argue, was almost a Tom Brady-esque situation where he goes right into the league with David Robinson and Greg Popovich, Sean Elliott. Like they had a squad, and he learned from off rip from college as well. The maturity and the responsibility and the leadership. I think he's a great leader. He doesn't do the rah rah, sis boom boss stuff that KG does, but Duncan got into a perfect situation when he entered the league. And then right when Jordan's leaving the league, Duncan gets to come in and basically run the show with David Robinson. And then they retool under great management and coaching and leadership to completely refinesse their team with Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. And then after that run, they find another gem in Kawhi Leonard, who ends up being what he's become. So I think Duncan, from the majority of his career standpoint, could not have dreamed of a better scenario. And it's not by choice. Every player would have loved to be in that situation. And I can't knock him for just falling into a perfect dream scenario. But instead of saying, would so-and-so thrive in that situation, would Duncan thrive as much as KG did in his situation in Minnesota? And I just think Kevin Garnett has every bit as a piece of the game that Tim Duncan has, but he has more athleticism and is a better defender, even if by a small margin. And that's why I give him the edge over Tim Duncan. And it's always fun to talk about these what ifs. What if so and so was, in another situation? But I don't see Kevin Garnett changing the 5 championships, that Duncan won. I'm not saying he wins any more than that. Like, oh, if you put him in there, they win 8. But I truly do believe what Kevin Garnett did on the Minnesota Timberwolves night in and night out with, you know, Wally Zerbiak and Troy Hudson, Fred Hoiberg, um, Michael Olowokandi. Like, he didn't have a squad to really compete, and he was sort of like the Tracy McGrady of the West, in my opinion. And then he ended up getting over the hump when he went to Boston, in an organically created big three in a sense. And they should have won 2 in Boston. They only won 1. And if he doesn't win in Boston, we're not having this conversation. Um, because he was finally in a good situation, and he made it happen.
Oh, for sure.
And to me, he was the best player on that team, even though Paul Pierce is the offensive cog. But I think KG, it was he's the one who implemented the tenacity on defense and anchored that team inside and out. But I just wish he would have been able to do that earlier, in his career. And he's got a lot of miles on that body too, coming from high school.
Oh, for sure.